All right, so now I'm going to tell you some stories about when we were working with the White Shark Research Project. At that time it was still the White Shark Research Project, and it was the early 90s, and we were working with the Natal Sharks Board, the NSB. They used to be called the Natal Anti-Sharks Board, but then they became the Natal Sharks Board. Excuse me. And what they did, they laid out the nets, the shark nets, along the Natal coastline, and this started from the 50s or something. And Beulah Davis was the first director of the Natal Sharks Board. But when I worked with the Natal Sharks Board, I was working with the director, Graham Charter, who unfortunately has passed away. A very, very nice man. And I was working with Paul van Blurk and Mike Anderson, and we call him Mark Alpha, and Richard Shuri, and Marconi. Christ, I can't remember all the different names, but in any case, they'll come along as we go. So anyway, they testing this barrier, the Natal Sharks Board. This is years ago. This is the early 90s, right after we got the great white shark protected. So they'd already been experimenting with this electronic shark repellent barrier, because the Sharks Board came under a lot of fire because of the shark nets. Now, what people don't understand is that shark nets are not a barrier which keeps sharks out of an area. Shark nets, anti-shark nets, are gill nets. And here's a shark net. Yeah, okay. So imagine this is a net. The water above it can be 2 meters, and the water below it can be 2 or 3 meters, and they're staggered. So you'll have a net here, right? And then you'll have a net here, and then you'll have a net there, and a net there. So they stagger the nets like this. So you can go between the nets, you can go over the nets, you can go under the nets. That's not a problem. But these nets are not a barrier. People have this idea that shark nets are a barrier. They're not a barrier. They're independent gill nets that are set along a beach. Excuse me, sorry. And they are designed to decimate the population of large sharks in the area. But unfortunately, they kill turtles, they kill dolphins, they kill many inoffensive or unoffensive shark species that will never attack a human being, hammerheads and grey nurse or ragged-tooth sharks. They catch a lot of small sharks which would never bite a human being because they're too small. Dolphins, small whales get caught in these nets. But they are designed to capture and kill large sharks. But unfortunately, they capture and kill everything because they're not discerning. The gill nets are not discerning. So a large shark swims into the net, gets entangled, the boats go out and they pull up the nets and they find these sharks, tiger sharks, bull sharks, great white sharks in these nets. So the nets are designed to bring the population of sharks down. And in bringing the population of sharks down, they diminish the chance of a shark attack. So if you've got 100 sharks that are swimming in an area where there's no nets, let's say you got 33 great whites and 33 bull sharks and 33 tiger sharks. The chance of a shark attack is whatever the percentage is. Let's say the chance is 20% that there could be a shark attack. But if you kill half of the tiger sharks and half of the great white sharks and half of the bull sharks, now you don't have 33, you've only got 15. We're not going to divide a shark in half, but you've got 15 sharks and 15 great whites and 15 bull sharks and 15 tiger sharks. So therefore, instead of having a 20% chance of a shark attack, you only have now a 10% chance of a shark attack. And that's how the shark nets are designed. Just so you understand, they are gill nets. They're designed to decimate the population of sharks in order to bring down the chances of an encounter between a shark and a human being. So now you understand that. Now the Sharks Board for many years have come under fire because it's extremely destructive. And that's a fact. You know, I'm friends with these guys. I worked at the Sharks Board. I worked with the Sharks Board extensively. They're doing a job, but the method, the shark nets are extremely indiscriminate in what they kill. They are Satan to the environment, and the Sharks Board are rightly under fire because of the system of shark nets, which actually work really well, unfortunately. So, you know, they started incorporating drum lines and all the rest of it. But it's also very expensive to maintain these nets, and because you've got to have boats going out every day to check the nets and make sure the nets are fine. And if there's a bit of a storm, they've got to go check the nets. It's a very expensive operation. So Norman Starkey, who is, we called him Marconi because he was a genius. He was working for the Sharks Board, and him and Graham Charter, the director of the Sharks Board, were primarily involved in, and also Jeremy Cliff, the scientist, the chief scientist for the Natal Sharks Board. They were very involved in developing this shark barrier, this electronic shark barrier that would put out an electric pulse, which was supposed to deter sharks. But anything when it comes to the ocean comes with a lot of issues and problems and corrosion and movement. The ocean is very violent, very volatile, very it's a great adversary to anything. It's a challenge working in the ocean. The ocean is so powerful. That's what I'm trying to say, that working with the ocean and setting up equipment in the ocean and having the equipment last in the ocean is a challenge. It's a volatile and significant enemy, the ocean is, when it comes to us trying to use technology in it. Anyway, so once we got the great white shark protected, we were down in the Cape Town. We worked out of the South African Natural History Museum. That was our headquarters, and we had a shark display down in the harbour, the waterfront in Cape Town. The Natal Sharks Board contacted us and said, well, they've been testing this barrier with bull sharks and tiger sharks, and it's been successful. However, they wanted to come down to the Cape and work with us to test this barrier on great white sharks. So we said, well, come on down. I mean, this is something we're very interested in because we've just got the great white shark protected. And of course, we would support any effort, anything to protect sharks, and specifically the great white shark at that time, because we were very focused on the protection of the great white shark. So anyway, we first worked in False Bay for a little while, and we did some testing in False Bay. And then eventually we decided to move down to Dyer Island, and because the sharks were really cooking at Dyer Island. So we went to have a look at Dyer Island. We found sharks straight away. We found them in great numbers. So we decided, let's go down there. And False Bay is just open. So it's an open bay. It's quite difficult to set up a project. Now, why we wanted to work at Dyer Island is because you got this channel between the two islands. So you got Dyer Island, which is a bird colony, and it's pretty big. It's probably plus minus a kilometer long, and it's a roundish island. And then on the seaward side of Dyer Island, you got Giza Rock, which is a large seal colony, home to about 60,000 seals. And that colony is maybe from point to point 500, 600 meters long. And between the two islands, you've got Shark Alley. You've got this channel that's only about 6 meters deep at its deepest. And it's about 150 meters that separate the two islands. So you got this channel between the two islands, and then it's got kelp beds and everything else. And it's called Shark Alley. And it was perfect to test the barrier, because the barrier was about 150 meters long. So what we did, we had 3 boats, but 2 boats that were anchored together. So we took the barrier, and so imagine this is the channel. Here's the channel running down like that, 150 meters wide. And we anchored the boats in the middle of the channel, and we ran the barrier, which was also about 150 meters long. It was this electronic barrier that floated on the surface with its electrodes. And we ran it in almost like a J shape. So it ran from the seal colony, and it ran out like that in a J shape, and it came back to the boat, the 2 boats, and one of the boats had a generator on it, and the other boat, our research boat, had all the chum and baits. And we would be chumming, so our boat was chumming the water constantly. Chumming, and baiting. We had baits out, so we were just inside of the barrier, and the barrier went around like that. And this is quite interesting as well. There's quite a few interesting things that come out of the story. So we were chumming the water and had the baits out. And how we worked it, because this is how science works, you do it in a specific protocol. So the generator would be running on this boat, powering the barrier, the electronic repellent barrier. And it would be off for 2 hours, and then it would be switched on for 2 hours. Then it would be switched off for 2 hours, then it would be switched on for 2 hours. So we were actually living on the island. And now I'm going to go back to that story. But I'm just setting up the stage so you understand what we were up to. So in the next video, I'll be talking more about the actual barrier. And I'll also talk about this in white shark behavior. So that's what we were doing at Dyer Island. And we were actually living on the island. Now the island has got this, the island used to be a guana factory or guana colony or whatever you want to call it. Now guana is bird shit. And you got tens of thousands of birds on this island, hundreds of thousands of birds on this island. You got cormorants, you got penguins, you got seagulls, you got oyster catchers, and the guana, the bird shit, is very valuable because these birds are on the island. And before it became a reserve, people used to come to the island. They built a house on the island and buildings, and they used to farm the guana off the island because it's the ultimate fertilizer and very valuable. But by the time we were working there, the guana industry had stopped, and there was a house on the island with like 4 or 5 rooms and a kitchen and a shower that worked from rainwater, for God's sake. So you got 100,000 birds on this island. Not the penguins because they can't fly, but all the other birds are sitting on the roof, shitting on the roof, and then it rains, and all this guana and bird shit runs into the holding tank, and it's a cold shower. It's not a hot shower. Cold shower, and you have a shower, and it smells like you're showering in bird shit. But, that's what you got. That's how we lived. We were hardcore. We weren't pussies, I can tell you that. So in any case, we decided to go to Dyer Island. And we're going to live on the island because we're right there. And then it would have been easier to live on land. In retrospect, we should have just lived on land, and that was it. But we stayed on the island, which has got all sorts of problems because it's not a very protected. There's a little jetty, there's a little pier, a jetty that comes out where the boats used to come in. But you're talking about cranky boats, and it's rocky. And the channel coming into the island is only, 4 or 5 meters wide. And then you've got rocks on each side. So you've got to come in perfectly. And if the wind direction and the wave direction is incorrect, you've got waves following you in, and you've got to sit outside and wait for the right time to shoot in. And then you've got this jetty where it's a lot of surge and a lot of waves break in. So you got to put the boats in a certain position, and they can't be against the jetty because they get smashed up against the jetty. So you got to tie them to the jetty. Then you got to run ropes to the shore and rope it around rocks and bollards on the shore to keep the boat away, and then the boat rides the waves. So it's kind of a nightmare working out there. Anyway, so the Natal Sharks Board are not used to Gansbaai Dyer Island conditions, and I've worked in many oceans around the world. I've sailed the world. I've sailed 25,000 miles, which is basically around the world. The Earth has got a circumference of 40,000 kilometers at the equator, and I've sailed more than 40,000 kilometers. I've sailed across the Pacific. I've sailed some of the worst oceans in the world. Rough, horrible oceans. But I can tell you what, from where you launch the boats in Gansbaai or Kleinbaai, which means small bay, harbor, to Dyer Island, which is only about 6 nautical miles, is one of the worst pieces of ocean on the planet when it decides to get rough. When it decides to kick you in the ass, it can be one of the worst pieces of ocean in the world, and dangerous. While I was working out there over those years, people lost their lives. And we tried to rescue people and they lost their lives. It's a dangerous piece of water. That's 6 miles. It's one of the most dangerous pieces of water in the world. So in any case, we arrive at, now I'm used to working there, so I know what it's about. So we arrive at Kleinbaai Harbor, or Small Bay Harbor. I'm just going to, Kleinbaai means small bay. So we arrive at Kleinbaai Harbor, which is basically a rock pool with a boat ramp in it, and you can put your boat into the water and out you go. And you have to run down this channel, and there's waves breaking, so you on a normal calm day you can just run out. But on a rough day, you sit at the jetty. You actually sit on the jetty in the harbor, Kleinbaai Harbor, and you watch, and the waves come rolling in, the big sets come rolling in. And when the last big roller comes in, I'm talking about 10, 15-foot waves, and they're rolling and they're brawling in and they're shouldering themselves into that channel. When you leave in the harbor, when the last one comes in, you go for it, because by the time you run down this channel, and by the time you get to the end of the channel, which is about 150 meters or 180 meters or whatever, and you turn your boat out to sea, that last big broiling wave that's come in has passed, and now you can find your little gap to get out to sea. And then you run out to the island, and when you get to the island in rough weather, it's a whole different story, because you've got reef and kelp, and you got big waves. You got 20, 30-foot waves, 40-foot waves sometimes around you, and you got a circle, and they're cooling around the island, and they're feathering on top like this, and sometimes you got to escape them, and you got to run over. It's serious shit. Okay, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Anyway, so we get down to the harbor, Kleinbaai Harbor. And the Natal Sharks Board have got their boat, one of their boats they brought down from the Durban. And these guys are good. I mean, they know how to handle the rough conditions, excuse me. I mean, they're very professional guys. And then we got our boat, our research boat, which is a 22-foot boat. So the one boat that they got is 18 feet long. And it's a monohull, a very good monohull. And we've got, our research boat is a catamaran, a twin hull, and it's 22 feet long. And then they got a big inflatable boat, also about 20 feet long, a big inflatable boat. And for some reason, stupidly, we decided we're going to go stay on the island, and we're going to do all the research from the island. And we get there, and it's just after a big storm has muscled this way through the Cape, the Southern Cape. And these are the barren reaches of the Southern Cape coastline. This is not a place for little boys. This is a place for hard-boiled, serious men, And we get out to the harbor, and I look out there on the ocean, and I just see these big lumps moving across the horizon, mountains moving across the horizon. So I say to Graham, I say, This is not a day to go to the island. But the thing is, you got Danger Point that runs out. So the bay is like this. So here's Danger Point right at the end, and the bay goes in deep and around like that, and the island is out there. So you got Danger Point over here. Now Danger Point, we had a big northwesterly and southwesterly storm. So Danger Point, although the swells are big, the sea is calm because the wind is blowing offshore. But once you run about a mile and a half out to sea towards the island, then you lose the protection of Danger Point. And Danger Point's famous for the Birkenhead that went down, and they lost hundreds of lives on the Birkenhead. A lot of people have lost their lives off Danger Point. But once you go about a mile and a half out to sea, you lose the protection of the land, the point, and then you're into open ocean. And suddenly, from one minute to the other, you're running in reasonably dealable conditions, and then you're suddenly in conditions that, can make a grown man cry, kind of thing. So Graham and myself, and we chat, and Mike Anderson and Paul van Blurk and all the guys are there, and from the Sharks board, and eventually we say, okay, we're going to do it. Let's try it. Let's just go. And if we get out there and it doesn't work, we'll come back. So because my boat was the biggest with the most space on it, our research boat, they loaded my boat with the generator and this 150-meter cable, which weighed half a ton. I mean, heavy. My boat was lying heavy in the water. Their boat was light. Their boat was full of food and provisions and beer and whiskey and that kind of stuff. The good fun stuff. And then the inflatable just had, hardly anything on it. So the plan was that we'd get to the island, the inflatable would run in first, and there was a slipway, there was a boat ramp, and they had logs, and then the inflatable would be pulled up the slip ramp on the logs because they had a big winch there. Then the Natal Sharks boat, 18-foot boat, would get to the dock, turn around, get onto the dock, and then I would run in with our boat, spin around, and then we tie the boats up and run tether lines to the rocks and the bollards to keep the boat safe. So we're running out there now. It's myself and a guy called Richard Shuri that are on, the two of us on my boat. And there's Graham Charter and Marconi, and they're on the one boat, and there's a bunch of guys on the other boat, but they're running light. So we're running out to sea, and they skipping away ahead of me, and we're running, and suddenly we pass the protection of the point. And now we're not running on an ocean anymore. We're running between mountains. I mean, you're running in swells where, so the boat's running like this, and the swells come like that, and you go up this swell like that, and the swell is so big and steep, the boat starts breaking sideways like that and starts sliding down the swell. And my heart, I'm at the throttle and the controls, my heart's in my throat, and the boat slides down the swell, and you've got to like play with the power. And because the boats are heavy, you can feel it wallowing in the water, and then the swell passes, and then you go again and you run, and you see the next big mountain coming towards you, and it picks you up, and you slow down because otherwise you go flying down this, and you can broach and you can actually turn the boat over. So we get to the island. We get to this island, Dyer Island, and it's just Armageddon out there. And when I get there, the rubber duck, the inflatable boat's circling, the Sharks board boat is circling, and we start circling. So, okay, so we're watching, and we're talking to each other on the radio, and eventually we decide, okay, we're out here, let's just do it. Let's go for it. So we wait for a lull between the big waves, and the inflatable boat runs in, and they're quick, and they get it, and they winch it up out the water on the logs, and it's safe. Then the 18-foot Sharks board boat, the boat it's actually designed to go through waves and stuff. They shoot in, And they get in and they manage to get in safely, and they turn the boat around and they radio me and they say, okay, Craig, when you're ready, come in. And Richard Shuri and I on the boat. So I'm circling, and the big waves are coming. I'm running out to sea to get away from the waves breaking, because I don't want to drown out there or be eaten by a shark. And eventually we find the right gap. We find a lull, and I go into I run in. And like I say, the channel that you got is the channel is, the boat is longer in length than the width of the safe channel, because the channel goes like that, boom, and it's rocks. And we run inside there, and we get in, and we 20 meters away from the jetty, the pier, and a wave comes in, and it picks our boat up, and I managed to reverse it so it doesn't push us in, and it hits the shark sport boat, and it pulls the shark sport boat away from the dock. So now we got chaos. So there's a couple of guys in the water trying to push the boat back to the dock, and they all shouting to me, no, go out, get out of here again, because now it's all chaos. But now you don't have any place to maneuver, because you got bricks all around you. It's just rocks all around you. Anyway, so I put one motor into forward gear, and the one motor into reverse gear, because there's a catamaran, so the motors are quite wide apart, and I managed to spin the boat around. But by the time the boat comes around like this, there's big waves coming. The next set is coming in, and there's no ways I can get out of there, and the wind's blowing. So I've turned the boat around, and the wind has actually blown me into. So here's the jetty. There's the jetty. Now I'm supposed to come like this and turn around and come up against the jetty like that. So there's the jetty there, and I'm supposed to dock against the jetty. So this is the end of the jetty, and the island is over here. So here's the island, there's the end of the jetty sticking out. And I'm here, so I turn the boat like this. I try and spin the boat around, but because it's so heavy and the wind is blowing, the wind blows us in front of the jetty. So now, and past the jetty. So now I'm basically in this little rock pool, and I've got rocks behind me and the jetty behind me, like a few meters away. And in front of me are rocks, and what I've got to do at that point, I've got to maneuver the boat out like that, and then away and up to, out to sea again. But the waves that are rolling in are huge. So these are huge waves, and there's no ways I can go. So I'm stuck. And this first big roller comes in, and I say to Richard, hold on. And this big wave comes up, and it just boils up. And just give me 1 second. Currently blocked for cancel. So this big wave comes up like this, and I can't go anywhere. I've got to just keep the boat in one position, because I can't go forward. If I go forward, I'm on the rocks. If I go backwards, I'm on the rocks. And this wave hits, and the wave comes like this, and the boat climbs the wave and smashes through the wave. And I just go, wah, wah, power, like boom, boom. And it shoots through the wave, and the boat goes vertical like this. Now, the engines on that boat had mercury cutout switches, and which are designed to kick in and cut the engines and kill the engines when the boat is flipping over, so that the engines are not the spinning and can actually kill you or harm you, the propellers. The boat went so steep that the mercury cutout switches kicked in, and both motors died. Boom. So we smashed through this wave, and both motors died. Boom, and we come down. And now we're dead in the water. And Richard is lying on the deck. He had a bow rope. He's lying on the deck, and he scrambles up. And now there's another roller coming in, and our boat's slowly drifting side on. And I'm on the engines. I'm trying to get this engine started. And one of the engines fires up. And it fires up as that big wave is coming. And I just hit that motor flat out. Whop, and it goes, and we smash that wave again. Boom, like that. Straight to the wave. Boat goes up. Richard goes overboard. Richard ends up in the water, hanging on the rope. engine cuts out again. Bang, we're dead in the water. And the third wave of the set's coming. And we're drifting this way. And by this time, the whole boat, the entire boat is up to my knees in water. There's so much water on the deck. There's boxes, all these Pelican cases that they're actually watertight. But they were full of equipment, electronic equipment and camera equipment. They're all floating. They'd been washed overboard and they're washing up onto the rocks. We didn't lose anything, thank goodness. We actually got everything back. And but the next wave comes and I'm on those engines. Wah, 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 wah. And I managed to start another engine. Just at and the boat's like this and the waves come in and I hit that engine and we managed to turn. I don't know how we got out of this. And we just, Rich is in the water still. He's still in the water, holding on to that rope. And we blast basically right through this wave. And I've got a T-top and a screen in front of me. It hit us so hard that I ducked down behind the console because I thought the screen is going to come smashing into my face. And we bashed through that wave. Boom. And the motors were dead again. But that was the last of the set. It was only 3 waves, thank God. And I'm on the motors again. I get them started. And Richard clambers. I go and I help Richard. He gets back on board. The guys on shore, they've got the Sharksboard boat under control. And they're running around on the rocks picking up boxes, Pelican cases and everything, all the equipment that's washed off the boat. And I managed to idle the boat back around and up to the jetty. And we tied to the jetty and we quickly get the ropes over and tied onto the rocks and stuff. And we survived it. I don't know how we survived that experience, but we survived it. And it was hectic and it was frightening. And Graham Charter came over to me. I mean, I was only a young guy. I wasn't yet the director. I was senior operations officer. I wasn't director of the White Shark Research Institute at that time. So I was senior operations officer. And I was 20, maybe 22 years old or something. So I was a youngster, but living in a big man's world. And Graham Charter came over to me afterwards and he patted me on my back and he said, "Well done, young man. Well done. You handled that really well." And it made me very, very proud. But anyway, so that was the start of working with the barrier. So I've set the whole thing up for you. And in the next video, I'm going to talk to you more about what happened when we were actually working with the barrier. We had some crazy experiences. Thank you very much.